I never wanted to be a father. The thought had never even crossed my mind. I was 26 years old, working 60-hour weeks at a Seattle warehouse, living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew and had a radiator that clanked so loud it sounded like someone was hammering on the pipes every night. My life was simple, uncomplicated, and exactly the way I wanted it. I had no responsibilities beyond showing up to work on time and remembering to pay my rent. I certainly didn't have room in my life for a kid. But all of that changed on a Tuesday evening in March when my older brother Marcus showed up at my apartment door with his 10-year-old son Ethan, a half-zipped duffel bag, and a confession that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family, responsibility, and what it means to truly love someone. What Marcus told me that night, standing in my doorway soaking wet from the Seattle rain, made my blood run cold. He said he was leaving the country with a woman he'd met on the internet 3 months prior. He said he needed to find himself, that fatherhood had drained every ounce of life from him, that he couldn't do it anymore. He said his son, his own flesh and blood, was better off without him. Then he walked out of my apartment, got into a waiting cab, and disappeared into the night. That was 4 years ago. I haven't seen or heard from Marcus since, except for one drunken phone call 6 months after he left and a handful of pathetic text messages that I deleted without reading. In those 4 years, I went from being a carefree bachelor who could barely take care of himself to becoming a father to a boy who wasn't mine by blood, but became mine in every single way that mattered. I learned how to manage chronic asthma, how to pack school lunches, how to help with algebra homework I didn't understand. I worked 3 jobs to afford his medications. I stayed up countless nights holding him while he cried for a mother who abandoned him and a father who chose a stranger over his own son. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to code his first website, how to stand up for himself when kids at school made fun of him for being small and sick. I watched him transform from a scared, sickly child who barely spoke above a whisper into a confident, brilliant young man who got accepted into Stanford University on a full scholarship. And then, just 3 weeks ago, everything came full circle in a way I never could have imagined. I had saved for 8 months to buy Ethan his first car, nothing fancy, just a reliable used Honda Civic that would get him safely to and from campus. I presented him with the keys on a sunny Saturday morning, wrapped in a small box with a red bow. He cried when he opened it. He told me I didn't have to do this, that I'd already given him more than he ever deserved. I told him he deserved the world, and this was just the beginning. That same afternoon, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard a voice I thought I'd never hear again. It was Marcus. He told me he'd heard about Ethan's acceptance to Stanford. He told me he was proud, that he'd changed, that he'd been sober for 8 months and seeing a therapist. He told me he wanted to reconnect with his son, to be part of his life again now that all the hard parts were over. He asked if he could come visit that weekend to see Ethan and celebrate his accomplishments. I should have said no. I should have told him to go to hell and hung up the phone. But something in his voice, some pathetic desperation, made me pause. I told him I'd ask Ethan and get back to him. When I mentioned it to Ethan that evening, I expected anger. I expected him to shut down or break down or tell me he never wanted to see Marcus again. Instead, he just looked at me with those dark, intelligent eyes that had seen far too much pain for someone so young. And he said something that shocked me. He said, "Let him come. I want him to see what I became without him." So I called Marcus back and told him he could visit on Saturday. I gave him the address and told him to be there at 2 in the afternoon. I didn't tell him what to expect. I didn't warn him that the son he abandoned had grown into someone extraordinary, someone who had every right to hate him, but had somehow risen above all that bitterness to become kind, compassionate, and successful beyond measure. I just told him to show up. And he did. Marcus arrived exactly on time, pulling up in a rental car with flowers in one hand and what I assumed was some expensive gift in the other. He looked different than I remembered. Older, thinner, with gray streaking through his hair and deep lines around his eyes. He looked like someone who'd been through hell and barely made it back. But I felt no sympathy for him. Not after what he'd put his son through. Not after what he'd put me through. Ethan was standing next to me on the porch when Marcus got out of the car. I could feel the tension radiating from Ethan's body, could see his jaw clenched tight and his hands balled into fists at his sides. But his face remained calm, neutral, giving nothing away. Marcus walked up the path slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. He stopped a few feet away from us, and for a long moment, nobody said anything. Then Marcus smiled, that same charming smile I remembered from our childhood, and held out the flowers. "Hey, son," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I brought these for you. To celebrate your achievement." "Stanford, that's incredible. I always knew you were smart." Ethan didn't move, didn't reach for the flowers, didn't smile back. He just stood there, staring at the man who'd abandoned him, and I could see something shifting behind his eyes. Something cold and final. "You don't get to call me that," Ethan said quietly. Marcus's smile faltered. "Call you what?" "Son," Ethan said. "You don't get to call me son. Not anymore. You lost that right 4 years ago when you left me on James's couch and never looked back." The flowers in Marcus's hand started to droop. "Ethan, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I'm here now. I want to make things right. I want to be your father again." "You were never my father," Ethan said, his voice steady and strong. "Not in any way that mattered. A father shows up. A father stays, even when things get hard. A father loves his child more than he loves himself. You did none of those things." Marcus's face crumpled. "Please, Ethan. I'm trying. I've changed. I'm sober now. I'm getting help. I want to be better. Just give me a chance." Ethan shook his head slowly. "You want a chance? You had thousands of chances. Every single day for 10 years, you had the chance to be the father I needed. And you failed. Every single time." He turned to me then, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes, but his voice remained strong. "James, can you give me the car keys? The ones you gave me this morning." I was confused, but I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys to the Honda Civic. I placed them in Ethan's outstretched hand, and he closed his fingers around them tightly. Then he turned back to Marcus. "You said you wanted to celebrate my achievements," Ethan said. "You want to be proud of me, to claim some part of who I've become. But you don't get to do that. Because none of this, none of what I am today, has anything to do with you." He held up the car keys. "Do you know what these are? They're the keys to my first car. The car that James bought me after saving money for 8 months. The same James who worked 3 jobs so he could afford my asthma medications. The same James who stayed up with me every single night when I couldn't breathe and thought I was going to die. The same James who went to every parent-teacher conference, every science fair, every school play, even when he was exhausted and could barely keep his eyes open. The same James who never once, not even for a single day, made me feel like I was a burden or an obligation or anything less than wanted." Ethan's voice cracked, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "James is my father, not you. He earned that title through 4 years of showing up, of sacrificing, of loving me unconditionally even when I wasn't his responsibility. You were supposed to be my father by blood, but you chose to walk away. So I'm choosing too. I'm choosing him." Then Ethan turned to me, and with tears streaming down both of our faces, he pressed the car keys into my hand. "These belong to you," he said. "Because everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you. You're the man who raised me. You're my dad, and I want the whole world to know it." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest was heaving, and tears were pouring down my face. I pulled Ethan into my arms and held him as tightly as I could, feeling his body shake with sobs against my chest. Behind us, I heard the flowers hit the ground. I heard footsteps moving away, heard a car door open and close, heard an engine start. I heard Marcus drive away, and I knew, without looking, that it was the last time we'd ever see him. When Ethan finally pulled away, his face was red and blotchy, but there was something lighter in his eyes. Something free. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I didn't plan to do that. When I saw him standing there, trying to act like he had any right to be proud of me, I couldn't hold it back anymore." "Don't apologize," I said, my voice rough. "You said what needed to be said. I'm proud of you. For telling him off? For knowing your worth," I said. "For understanding that you deserved better than what he gave you. For choosing the people who actually love you instead of settling for someone who only showed up when it was convenient." Ethan smiled through his tears. "I learned that from you." We went inside after that, leaving the wilted flowers on the porch where Marcus had dropped them. We ordered pizza, watched terrible movies, and talked late into the night about everything and nothing. We didn't mention Marcus again. There was no need. That chapter was closed. But this story, the story of how I became a father and how Ethan became my son, didn't start that Saturday when Marcus showed up seeking redemption. It started 4 years earlier, on that rainy Tuesday night when my entire world turned upside down. And if you want to understand why Ethan's words meant so much, why his choice to call me Dad was the greatest moment of my life, you need to know everything that came before. You need to know about the sleepless nights and the medical emergencies. You need to know about the financial struggles and the moments of doubt. You need to know about the first time Ethan called me Uncle James and how it made my heart soar. You need to know about the day he stopped flinching when I touched his shoulder. You need to know about the parent-teacher conferences where his teachers told me what a remarkable child he was and how lucky I was to have him, not knowing that I felt lucky every single day. You need to know about the time he came home crying because kids at school said he was weird for not having a real mom or dad, and how I held him and told him that family isn't about biology, it's about love. You need to know about the Christmas morning when I could only afford to get him one present, a used scientific calculator he'd mentioned wanting, and how he hugged me so tight and told me it was the best gift he'd ever received. You need to know about the day the doctor told us his asthma was under control and he could live a completely normal life, and how we both cried tears of relief in that sterile examination room. You need to know about the college application process, when I stayed up until 3 in the morning helping him edit his essays even though I had to be at work at 6. You need to know about the day the acceptance letter from Stanford arrived, and how we screamed and jumped around my tiny apartment like we'd won the lottery. You need to know all of it. Every moment, every struggle, every small victory that built the foundation of our relationship. Because that's what made his words to Marcus so powerful. They weren't just words. They were the truth, earned through years of showing up, of choosing each other, of building something real and lasting out of the wreckage Marcus left behind. So let me take you back to the beginning. Let me show you how a man who never wanted to be a father became the best father he could possibly be. Let me show you how a broken, scared little boy became a strong, confident young man. And let me show you why, when Marcus finally came back seeking forgiveness and reconciliation, it was already far too late. This is my story. This is Ethan's story. And this is the story of what family really means. The rain that Tuesday evening wasn't the gentle Seattle drizzle that locals barely noticed anymore. It was a downpour, the kind that turned streets into rivers and made you question every decision that led you to living in the Pacific Northwest. I'd just gotten home from my shift at the warehouse, my clothes damp despite my rain jacket, my boots squelching water with every step. My back ached from lifting boxes all day, and all I wanted was to heat up some leftover Chinese food and zone out in front of my laptop until exhaustion pulled me under. I was microwaving fried rice when the buzzer rang the first time. I ignored it. Probably someone buzzing the wrong apartment. It happened all the time in my building. The buzzer rang again, longer this time, more insistent. I kept my eyes on the microwave, watching the container slowly rotate under the yellow light. 30 seconds left. The buzzer rang a third time, and this time it didn't stop. Someone was just holding their finger on the button, letting it blare through my apartment in one long, obnoxious drone. Jesus Christ, I muttered, abandoning my food and stalking over to the intercom. I jabbed the button. What? It's Marcus. Let me in. My brother's voice crackled through the speaker, distorted by static and rain. I closed my eyes and counted to 5, trying to summon the patience I'd need for whatever crisis had brought him to my door at 8 o'clock on a weeknight. Marcus and I weren't close. We'd grown up in the same house, shared the same parents, but somewhere along the way we diverged into completely different people. He was the successful one, the one who'd gotten the scholarship, the corporate job, the wife and kid. I was the screw-up, at least in our family's eyes. The one who dropped out of community college to work with his hands, who'd never had a serious relationship, who lived alone in a crappy apartment and seemed perfectly content with his simple life. Marcus had always looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't trying harder to be more like him. And I'd looked at him with resentment, tired of being compared to someone who seemed to have it all figured out. We saw each other maybe 3 times a year, at Christmas and Thanksgiving and the occasional guilt-driven family dinner. Every interaction followed the same pattern. He'd ask how I was doing in that tone that suggested he already knew the answer would disappoint him. I'd give him vague, non-committal responses that we'd make awkward small talk for exactly as long as politeness required, and then we'd go our separate ways, relieved to have our annual obligation fulfilled. So when I heard his voice through the intercom that night, my first thought wasn't concern. It was annoyance. What did he want now? Money, probably. Or maybe his fancy car had broken down nearby, and he needed a ride. Whatever it was, I knew it would be inconvenient, and I knew he'd phrase it as though he was doing me a favor by asking. I buzzed him in without saying anything and left my apartment door unlocked, then went back to the microwave to retrieve my now lukewarm rice. I heard him coming up the stairs, heard the heavy sound of something being dragged, and then my door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. I turned, a forkful of rice halfway to my mouth, and froze. Marcus stood in my doorway, soaked to the bone. His expensive wool coat was plastered to his body, his dark hair dripping water onto my floor. He was breathing hard, like he'd run up the 3 flights of stairs, and his eyes had a wild, desperate quality I'd never seen before. But it wasn't Marcus who made me lower my fork slowly, my appetite vanishing. It was the child, Ethan, my nephew. I'd seen him maybe a dozen times in his 10 years of life, usually at those same obligatory family gatherings. He was always a quiet kid, the kind who stayed close to the wall at parties and spoke in whispers when adults addressed him directly. He was small for his age, thin and pale, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's sharp cheekbones. But I'd never seen him look like this. He was sitting on top of a large duffel bag just outside my apartment door, his small body hunched over like he was trying to make himself disappear. His lips had a bluish tinge that made my stomach clench, and his breathing was loud and labored, each inhale accompanied by a high-pitched wheeze that sounded like air whistling through a too narrow pipe. His clothes were soaked through, and he was shivering violently, his thin arms wrapped around his chest. "Marcus, what the hell?" I started, but my brother cut me off. "I need you to watch him," Marcus said, grabbing the duffel bag and hauling it into my apartment. Ethan slid off it and stumbled inside, his movements slow and clumsy. "Watch him? What are you talking about?" "Just for a while," Marcus said, not meeting my eyes. He was moving around my small space frantically, setting down the bag, pulling out a small medical device I didn't recognize, his hands shaking. "Few weeks, maybe. I don't know exactly. Weeks." I set my food down on the counter and crossed my arms. "You can't just drop your kid off without any warning and expect me to. He's got his meds," Marcus interrupted, unzipping the bag and pulling out orange prescription bottles that rattled as he set them on my kitchen counter. "The nebulizer's right here. You just have to make sure he uses it twice a day, morning and night. And he's got an inhaler for emergencies. Keep it on him at all times." I stared at the growing collection of medical supplies appearing on my counter. Medicines, a mask attached to some kind of machine, instruction pamphlets, more bottles. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? Why can't you watch your own son?" Finally, he stopped moving and looked at me. Really looked at me. And what I saw in his face made my blood run cold. It wasn't just stress or exhaustion. It was something darker. Something final. "I'm leaving," he said flatly. "Leaving? Leaving where?" "The country. Tonight. I've got a flight to Costa Rica at midnight." I laughed. A short, sharp sound with no humor in it. "You've got to be kidding me. You're leaving the country? For what, a vacation? And you're just dropping your sick kid off at my place?" "It's not a vacation," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I'm going with someone. Someone I met. We're starting over." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I looked at Ethan, who was now slumped on my couch, his eyes half closed, his breathing still alarmingly loud. Then I looked back at my brother. "You're running away," I said slowly, the full horror of the situation beginning to dawn on me. "With some woman you just met. And you're abandoning your son." "I'm not abandoning him," Marcus snapped, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I'm making sure he's taken care of. I'm leaving him with family. I'm not his father, Marcus. You are. You can't just, I can't do this anymore." Marcus's voice cracked, rising to something close to a shout. "Do you have any idea what it's like? He's sick all the time. The medical bills are insane. The insurance barely covers anything. I'm drowning in debt. I haven't slept through a night in months, and I can't breathe. I can't think. I need to get out. So get a therapist," I shot back. "Take a weekend off. Don't abandon your kid." Marcus's face hardened, all the desperation draining away and leaving something cold and resolved in its place. "You don't get it because you don't have responsibilities. You don't have anyone depending on you. You just work your simple job and come home to your simple life. and you have no idea what it's like to be trapped. Trapped, I repeated, my voice dangerous. By your own son. I'm not cut out for this, Marcus said. I never was. Sarah knew it. That's why she left. She saw what I am, and she got out before she got dragged down with me. Sarah, Ethan's mother. She'd left 3 years ago, just packed her bags one day and moved to Phoenix to start a new life. She sent child support checks and birthday cards, but she'd made it clear she wanted nothing to do with actual parenting. I'd thought Marcus was different. I'd thought, whatever his faults, he at least loved his kid. You're really going to do this, I said. It wasn't a question. He's better off here, Marcus said. And now he was moving toward the door, backing away like he was afraid if he stayed too long he'd lose his nerve. You've got time, James. You're not doing anything important. You can give him structure, stability, things I can't give him anymore. I work 60 hours a week. I can barely afford this shithole apartment. I don't know anything about kids, and I sure as hell don't know anything about sick kids. You'll figure it out, Marcus said, his hand on the door handle now. You're smarter than you think. You always were. Marcus, don't you dare walk out that door. But he was already opening it, already stepping into the hallway. His school information is in the bag, he called back. And his doctor's contact info. The prescriptions are all current. You just need to refill them next month. Marcus, I'll send money when I can, he said. And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that made my stomach drop. I stood there, frozen, listening to his footsteps pound down the stairs. Listened to the building's front door slam. Listened to nothing but the rain and Ethan's labored breathing. Slowly, I turned to look at my nephew. He was curled up on my couch now, his knees drawn to his chest, his eyes closed. He looked so small, so fragile, like a strong wind could blow him away. His lips were still tinged blue, and that wheeze was getting worse, each breath sounding more desperate than the last. Shit, I whispered, fear cutting through my anger. Shit, shit, shit. I grabbed my phone and did what any rational person would do when faced with a medical emergency they didn't understand. I Googled it. Child can't breathe, wheezing blue lips, what to do. The results were immediate and terrifying. Asthma attack. Respiratory distress. Possible hypoxia. Call 911 if symptoms severe. My hands were shaking as I looked at Ethan again. Was this severe? I had no frame of reference. His breathing was awful, but he wasn't passed out. He wasn't clutching his throat or gasping. He was just sitting there, eyes closed, wheezing. Marcus had said he had a nebulizer. I looked at the machine sitting on my counter, a small white device with a mask attached by a clear tube. There was an instruction pamphlet next to it. I grabbed it and started reading, my eyes racing over the words. For treatment of acute asthma symptoms. Load prescribed medication into chamber. Attach mask. Turn on machine. Treatment lasts 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, I could do this. There was a box of small plastic vials next to the machine, each one containing a clear liquid. I grabbed one, ripped it open, and squeezed the contents into the chamber like the diagram showed. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Ethan, I said, my voice coming out too loud in the quiet apartment. Ethan, buddy, I need you to sit up. He opened his eyes slowly, looking at me with an expression so dull and exhausted it broke my heart. I know you don't feel good, I said, moving to sit next to him on the couch. But your dad said you need to use this machine. The nebulizer. Can you do that for me? He nodded slightly, and I took that as permission. I turned on the machine, and it immediately started humming, a steady mechanical sound that filled the apartment. White mist began flowing through the tube and out of the mask. I held it up to Ethan's face, pressing it gently against his nose and mouth. Just breathe, I said, my voice softer now. Nice and slow. Let the medicine get into your lungs. He sat there, passive and compliant, breathing in the medicated mist while I held the mask in place with one hand and kept the other on his thin shoulder. I could feel him trembling under my palm, could feel each labored breath shudder through his small frame. We sat like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. Gradually, slowly, the wheezing started to soften. The blue tinge around his lips faded to a healthier pink. His breathing, while still not normal, became less desperate. When the machine finally sputtered and went quiet, I pulled the mask away and looked at him. Better. He nodded, and this time there was a little more awareness in his eyes. Yeah, thanks. His voice was small and hoarse, barely above a whisper, but it was the first word he'd spoken since arriving. You need anything else? Water? Food? He shook his head. Just tired. Okay, you can sleep. Take my bed. I'll take the couch. I expected him to argue, to insist he was fine on the couch, but he just nodded again and slowly pushed himself to his feet. He swayed a little, and I reached out instinctively to steady him. You okay? Yeah, just dizzy sometimes. After the treatment. He said it so matter-of-factly, like this was just a normal part of his life. Breathing treatments. Dizziness. Wheezing until his lips turned blue. Normal. I guided him to my bedroom, pulled back the covers on my unmade bed, and watched as he climbed in fully clothed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow, his body finally surrendering to exhaustion. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching him breathe. Each inhale was still a little rough, a little labored, but better than before. So much better. Then I closed the door softly and went back to the living room. I sat on my couch, in the same spot where Ethan had been wheezing minutes before, and stared at the collection of medical supplies on my counter. Prescription bottles, the nebulizer, instruction pamphlets, an inhaler, a folder I hadn't noticed before, probably containing all that school and doctor information Marcus had mentioned. This was my life now. I had a kid, a sick kid who needed constant medical care, who needed someone to make sure he took his medications and used his breathing treatments and didn't die from an asthma attack. A kid I didn't know, didn't understand, and had no idea how to take care of. I picked up my phone and tried calling Marcus. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I sent a text. You can't do this. Come back and get your son. The message showed as delivered but not read. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. No response. At some point, I fell into a restless sleep on the couch, my phone clutched in my hand, jumping awake at every sound. Every time Ethan coughed in the other room. Every time the rain hammered harder against the windows. Every time the radiator clanked. By the time gray morning light started filtering through the blinds, I'd accepted the truth I'd been trying to deny all night. Marcus wasn't coming back, and I had no idea what the hell I was going to do. The morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I woke up with my neck at an angle that sent shooting pains down my spine, my mouth tasting like something had died in it, and my phone dead in my hand because I'd forgotten to plug it in. For a few blissful seconds, I didn't remember. Then I heard a soft cough from my bedroom, and it all came crashing back. I had a kid. My brother had abandoned his son on my couch and fled the country, and now I was responsible for a 10-year-old boy with chronic asthma and God knew what other health issues. I plugged in my phone and waited for it to turn on, hoping against hope that there would be messages from Marcus. Apologies. Explanations. A return flight booked. There was nothing. I checked my email. Nothing. I checked every social media platform I could think of. Marcus's accounts were all still active, but there were no new posts, no updates. He'd simply vanished. I dragged myself off the couch and stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and staring at my reflection. I looked like hell. Dark circles under my eyes, stubble on my jaw, hair sticking up in every direction. I looked like someone who had no business being responsible for another human life. When I came out, Ethan was sitting at my small kitchen table, still in the same damp clothes from last night, his hair sticking up in the back. He was staring at the wall, not moving, barely blinking. Hey, I said awkwardly. Morning. How are you feeling? Okay, he said quietly, still not looking at me. Did you sleep all right? A small nod. I moved to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, looking for something appropriate to feed a child for breakfast. The contents were depressing. Half a carton of eggs, some questionable milk, condiments, and leftover takeout containers. You like eggs? I asked. Another nod. I scrambled 4 eggs in my one frying pan, burning them slightly because I kept getting distracted looking over at Ethan. He just sat there, silent and still, like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. I divided the eggs onto 2 plates and set one in front of him along with a fork. He looked at it for a moment, then picked up the fork and started eating with slow, mechanical bites. So, I said, sitting across from him with my own plate. Your dad said something about school. Do you know what school you're supposed to go to? Roosevelt Elementary, he said, his voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him. Do you know when you're supposed to be there? 30. I glanced at the clock. It was 7:15. Okay. And do you know where it is? 6 blocks from here. Dad said. That surprised me. Your dad told you where it is? Before we came. He said I'd be going to a new school. So Marcus had planned this. This wasn't some impulsive decision made in the heat of the moment. He'd known he was going to dump his son with me. He'd looked up schools in my neighborhood. He'd prepared Ethan for a new life without him. And he'd done it all without ever telling me. The anger that washed over me was so intense I had to set down my fork before I did something stupid like punch a wall. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Do you have a backpack? School supplies? Ethan shook his head. Dad didn't pack that stuff. Of course he didn't. All right, we'll figure it out. You can't go to school today anyway. We need to get you registered, talk to the office, all that stuff. I paused. Have you ever been to this school before? No. I was at Maple Ridge before. His old school. In whatever neighborhood Marcus used to live in before he decided to abandon his entire life. Do you like school? I asked, trying to make conversation. He shrugged. It's okay. What's your favorite subject? Another shrug. I don't know. I'm okay at math. Just okay. I'm good at it, he corrected quietly. But the other kids don't really like when I know all the answers. I felt my chest tighten. They give you a hard time? Sometimes. It's not a big deal. The way he said it, so resigned and matter-of-fact, made me want to drive to his old school and have words with whoever had made this small, sick kid feel bad for being smart. Well, I said, if anyone gives you a hard time at your new school, you tell me. Okay. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since he'd arrived. His dark eyes were guarded, like he was trying to figure out if I meant it or if I was just saying what adults were supposed to say. Okay, he said finally. We finished breakfast in silence. When we were done, I gathered all the prescription bottles from the counter and lined them up on the table. There were 5 of them, each with a long, complicated name I couldn't pronounce. Your dad said you need to take these, I said. Can you show me which ones and when? Ethan looked at the bottles, then pointed to 2 of them. These are for every day. 1 in the morning, 1 at night. This one is only if I have a really bad attack. This one is for allergies, but I don't need it right now. And this one is for if I get an infection. Okay. I opened my phone and created a new note, typing out everything he'd just said. The nebulizer is twice a day, morning and night, or more if I need it. And the inhaler? I need to keep it with me all the time. In case he couldn't breathe. In case his airways closed up and he started suffocating. In case he needed it to survive. Got it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We'll make sure you have it on you. Always. I spent the next hour going through the duffel bag Marcus had left. There wasn't much. A few changes of clothes, all too thin for Seattle weather. A toothbrush. A stuffed animal. A worn teddy bear that had seen better days. No books, no toys, no photos, nothing personal except that one bear. At the bottom of the bag, I found a folder. Inside were Ethan's medical records, thick enough to make my stomach sink. Pages and pages of doctor's visits, emergency room trips, specialist consultations. There was also a custody agreement from Marcus's divorce, showing that he had full custody and his ex-wife Sarah had agreed to supervised visitation only. There was no mention of me anywhere in any of these documents. No emergency contact listing, no guardianship papers, nothing that gave me any legal right to make decisions for this kid. If anything happened, if he needed medical care or had an emergency at school, I had no authority. I was just some guy his dad had left him with. I called the elementary school and explained the situation as vaguely as possible. My nephew was staying with me. His father was traveling. We needed to get him enrolled. The woman on the phone was kind but firm. I'd need his birth certificate, immunization records, proof of residency, and a letter from his legal guardian authorizing me to make educational decisions. I had none of those things except the immunization records in his medical folder. I'll work on it, I told her. But can he start this week? I need to get him settled. Bring what you have, she said. We'll figure out the rest. At least that was something. I called the warehouse next and told my supervisor I had a family emergency and needed a few days off. He was less accommodating than the school. James, we're already short-staffed. I can give you today, but I need you back tomorrow. I understand, but tomorrow, James. Or I'll have to find someone else for your shifts. I hung up feeling like the walls were closing in. I had no time off, no money to hire childcare, no idea how I was going to work 60 hours a week, and take care of a sick kid who needed constant supervision and medical care. But I didn't have time to spiral because Ethan needed another breathing treatment, and I still didn't really know how to work the nebulizer without fumbling through the instructions. We sat together on the couch while the machine hummed, and he breathed in the mist. His eyes were half closed, his small body exhausted even though the day had barely started. "Ethan," I said carefully, "did your dad tell you when he's coming back?" He didn't respond for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely audible over the machine, he said, "He's not." "What makes you say that?" "He told me. Last week. He said he was going away, and I was going to stay with you for a while. Maybe forever." "Forever?" The word hung in the air between us. "How did that make you feel?" I asked. He shrugged, the gesture he seemed to use for every question that was too hard to answer. "Did you want to stay with him?" Another shrug. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, "He doesn't really like me." My heart broke. "Ethan, that's not. It's okay," he interrupted, still staring ahead. "Mom didn't either. I'm used to it." I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? That his parents loved him? That would be a lie, and he'd know it. That he deserved better? He already knew that too. So I did the only thing I could think of. I put my arm around his thin shoulders and pulled him close. He was stiff at first, like he wasn't used to being touched, but after a moment, he relaxed slightly against me. We stayed like that until the treatment was finished, and then for a while after, neither of us speaking, the only sound the rain still coming down outside and the occasional car passing on the street below. And sitting there with this small, broken child who'd been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to love him, I made a decision. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no qualifications, no experience, no resources. But I'd be damned if I was going to be another person who failed him. Marcus had dumped this responsibility on me, probably expecting me to fail, expecting me to call child services or track down Sarah or do something to pass Ethan off to someone else. But I wasn't going to do that. Not because I was noble or selfless or any of those things, but because when I looked at this kid, I saw myself at that age. Quiet, invisible, trying so hard to be good enough that maybe someone would actually want to keep me around. And I knew what it felt like to be unwanted. I knew what it felt like to be the burden, the obligation, the one everyone tolerated but nobody actually chose. And I knew I couldn't do that to him. So right there, sitting on my shitty couch in my shitty apartment with a kid I barely knew, I decided that I was all in. I was going to figure out the medical stuff and the school stuff and the legal stuff. I was going to rearrange my entire life around keeping this child safe and healthy and, if possible, happy. I had no idea if I could actually pull it off. But I was going to try. Because somebody had to. And it looked like that somebody was me. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and crash courses in pediatric asthma management. I took Ethan to Roosevelt Elementary on Wednesday morning with his immunization records, a hastily written letter explaining that I was his temporary guardian while his father traveled for work, and absolutely no idea if they'd accept any of it. The school secretary looked at my collection of semi-legitimate documents with clear skepticism, but when she saw Ethan standing beside me, small and pale and clearly exhausted, her expression softened. "We'll need proper guardianship papers eventually," she said. "But we can enroll him provisionally for now. You'll need to update us if anything changes with his living situation." "I will," I promised. "And he has asthma. Chronic. He needs to have his inhaler with him at all times. We have a school nurse who can keep it in the office." "No," I interrupted, more forcefully than I intended. "I'm sorry, but no. He needs it on him. In his pocket. Always. His airways can close up fast, and if he has to run to the nurse's office first." I trailed off, imagining Ethan gasping for air, his lips turning blue, while he tried to make it down hallways to an office that might be locked. The secretary looked at me, then at Ethan, and nodded. "I'll make a note. He can keep it with him." Getting Ethan enrolled was just the first hurdle. I still needed to figure out how to actually care for him while working full-time. Daycare wasn't an option, both because I couldn't afford it and because Ethan was too old. After-school programs existed, but they required registration and fees I didn't have. For the first week, I did what any desperate person would do. I improvised. I moved my schedule around as much as possible, taking the earliest shift at the warehouse so I could be done by mid-afternoon. On days when that didn't work, I begged my downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chun, to check on Ethan after school. She was a retired teacher, kind and patient, and she agreed to let him sit in her apartment and do homework until I got home. I can't pay you much, I told her honestly, but I can give you $20 a week. She waved me off. Keep your money. I like the company. Still, I left $20 in her mailbox every Friday because I couldn't stand the idea of taking advantage of her kindness. The financial situation was dire. My warehouse job paid barely enough to cover my rent and utilities in normal circumstances. Adding a child to the equation, especially one with significant medical needs, was unsustainable. Ethan's medications alone cost over $300 a month, even with the insurance I barely qualified for. Groceries doubled because I was now feeding 2 people instead of 1. I had to buy school supplies, appropriate clothes for a growing kid, a real backpack instead of the torn one that had come in his duffel bag. Within 2 weeks, I'd maxed out the 1 credit card I had and started selling things. My gaming console went first, then my bike, then the nice watch my parents had given me for high school graduation. It wasn't enough. I picked up a second job doing night shifts at a 24-hour convenience store on weekends, which meant I was working 7 days a week, sometimes 18-hour days. I'd come home exhausted, heat up whatever simple dinner I'd managed to prepare, make sure Ethan did his homework and his breathing treatment, and then pass out for a few hours before doing it all again. It was unsustainable, and I knew it. But what choice did I have? Through it all, Ethan remained quiet and compliant. He never asked for anything. Never complained when dinner was cheap pasta for the 4th night in a row. Never protested when I couldn't afford to buy him the sneakers all the other kids apparently had. He just existed, taking up as little space as possible, trying so hard to not be a burden. And that broke my heart more than anything else. Because a 10-year-old shouldn't have to be that good. Shouldn't have to be that aware of being unwanted. One night, about 3 weeks in, I came home from my convenience store shift at 2 in the morning to find every light in the apartment on. My heart jumped into my throat. I'd left Ethan asleep. Had something happened? Was he okay? I rushed inside to find him sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas, his nebulizer running beside him, tears streaming silently down his face. Ethan, what's wrong? Are you okay? He nodded quickly, wiping his face. I'm fine. I just couldn't breathe and I got scared and I didn't know if I should call you, and, hey, it's okay, I said, kneeling beside his chair. You did the right thing. You used your inhaler? He nodded. It didn't help. So I did the nebulizer like you showed me. That's perfect. You did exactly right. I checked his breathing, which sounded rough but not dangerous. Do you feel better now? Yeah. I'm sorry I woke up. Don't apologize. Ever. For anything medical. You hear me? If you can't breathe, you wake me up. You call me. You do whatever you need to do. He nodded, but his face crumpled again. I hate this. I hate being sick all the time. I hate needing treatments and medicine, and I hate that I'm expensive and ruining your life. The words punched through me like a physical blow. Ethan, look at me. He did, his eyes red and watery. You are not ruining my life. Your dad ruined his own life, and your mom made her choices, but none of that is on you. You didn't ask for any of this. You didn't ask to have asthma. You didn't ask to be left with some uncle you barely know. None of this is your fault. But you have to work all the time now because of me, he said, his voice breaking. And you had to sell your stuff, and you never sleep, and stop, I said gently. Yes, things are tight right now. Yes, I'm working a lot. But that's not because of you. That's because the adults in your life made really shitty choices, and now we're dealing with it. Together. Okay. He didn't look convinced. I sat down in the chair next to him and tried to figure out what to say. How to explain to a 10-year-old that he was worth every exhausting hour, every dollar I didn't have, every sacrifice I was making. You want to know the truth? I finally said. Before you came here, I was just going through the motions. Working, sleeping, existing. I wasn't building anything. I wasn't working toward anything. I was just here. But now, I gestured around the apartment. Now I have a reason to get up in the morning. Now I have someone who needs me. And yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. But it matters. You matter. A fresh tear rolled down his cheek. Really? I reached out and wiped the tear away with my thumb. You're stuck with me now, kid. We're a team. He launched himself at me, wrapping his thin arms around my neck so tightly I could barely breathe. I held him, feeling his small body shake with sobs, and let him cry it out. When he finally pulled back, his face was blotchy and his eyes were swollen, but he looked lighter somehow. Less burdened. Can I tell you something? He asked quietly. Anything. I like it here. Better than before. You actually talk to me. Dad never really talked to me. My throat felt tight. Well, I like having you here too. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, and I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't temporary anymore. Somewhere in the last 3 weeks, without consciously deciding it, I'd stopped thinking of Ethan as Marcus's son who was staying with me for a while. He was just Ethan, my kid. The next morning, I made a decision. The 2 jobs, the constant exhaustion, the barely scraping by, it wasn't working. If I was going to do this, if I was really going to raise this kid, I needed to be smarter about it. I needed to be there for him, not just financially supporting him while running myself into the ground. So I quit the convenience store job. Yes, I needed the money, but I needed sleep more. I needed to be alert enough to notice if Ethan was having breathing problems, to help with homework, to actually be present. Instead, I started looking for ways to make money that didn't require me to be gone 18 hours a day. I'd always been good with computers. Self-taught, mostly, from hours of messing around online and fixing friends' laptops for beer money in my early 20s. I'd never thought of it as a real skill, just something I did for fun. But now I started offering my services on freelancing websites. Basic web design, simple coding fixes, tech support. The jobs were small at first. $50 to fix someone's WordPress site. $100 to build a basic landing page for a local business. But they added up, and I could do them from home, late at night after Ethan was asleep. Within a month, I was making almost as much from freelancing as I had from the convenience store, and I was home every night for dinner. Things were still tight, but they were manageable. And more importantly, I was there. When Ethan came home from school, I was there. When he needed his treatments, I was there. When he had nightmares about being abandoned or couldn't breathe and panicked, I was there. Being there, I was learning, was the most important part. 3 months into our new life together, the school called. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was in the middle of debugging a client's website when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this James Mitchell? A woman's voice asked. Yes. This is Principal Stevens from Roosevelt Elementary. I'm calling about Ethan. My stomach dropped. Is he okay? Did something happen? He's fine physically, she said quickly. But I'd like you to come in for a meeting tomorrow if possible. We've had some concerns raised by his teacher. Concerns. That word could mean anything, and my mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. Was he failing? Getting bullied? Having breathing problems they hadn't told me about? What kind of concerns? I asked. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come in tomorrow at 3? I had a shift at the warehouse until 5, but there was no way I was waiting. I'll be there. I spent the rest of the day anxious, barely able to concentrate on work. When Ethan got home from school, I searched his face for signs of trouble, but he seemed normal. Quiet, like always, but not upset. How was school? I asked as he dumped his backpack by the door. Fine. Anything interesting happen? He shrugged. Not really. Either nothing was wrong, or he was hiding it. I couldn't tell which. The next day, I left work early and walked to Roosevelt Elementary with my stomach in knots. Principal Stevens was a tall woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a demeanor that immediately made me want to confess to everything I'd ever done wrong. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing for me to sit in her office. Ethan's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, was already there, along with someone Principal Stevens introduced as the school counselor. Oh God, this was serious if they'd brought in the counselor. Is Ethan in trouble? I asked. No, Ms. Rodriguez said quickly. Not at all. Actually, quite the opposite. We wanted to talk to you about his academic performance. I blinked. His academic performance? Ethan is. Principal Stevens consulted a file on her desk. Well, he's exceptional. His standardized test scores are off the charts. He's reading at an 8th grade level. His math skills are even higher. And according to Ms. Rodriguez, he's finishing assignments meant to take a full class period in about 15 minutes. Ms. Rodriguez nodded. He's bored, Mr. Mitchell. The curriculum we have for 5th graders isn't challenging him at all. We'd like to discuss the possibility of moving him up a grade. Possibly 2. I sat back in my chair, stunned. You want to skip him ahead? It's not a decision we make lightly, Principal Stevens said. There are social considerations as well as academic ones. But Ethan is clearly not being served by staying where he is. He needs more advanced material. He's never mentioned being bored. I said. Does he seem engaged at home? Does he read a lot? Pursue interests independently? I thought about how Ethan spent his free time. Reading mostly. Books I had to get from the library because I couldn't afford to buy them. Books that seemed way too advanced for a 10-year-old. He'd also started teaching himself coding from free online tutorials, and lately he'd been asking questions about physics and astronomy that I couldn't answer. Yeah, I said. He's always reading or learning something. That's what we thought, Ms. Rodriguez said. The thing is, gifted students who aren't challenged can start to disengage. They can develop behavioral problems or lose their love of learning entirely. We don't want that to happen to Ethan. So what are you proposing exactly? We'd like to start him in 7th grade courses next semester, Principal Stevens said. He'd still be with his age group for some subjects, like PE and art, but for core academics, he'd be with the older kids. We'd monitor him closely to make sure he's adjusting well both academically and socially. And you think he can handle it? Based on his test scores and class performance, absolutely. The question is whether he wants to. That night, I sat Ethan down after dinner and told him about the meeting. His eyes widened as I explained what the teachers had said. They think you're really smart, kiddo. Like, way ahead of where you're supposed to be. They want to move you to harder classes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, will the other kids make fun of me? My heart ached. Maybe some of them. Kids can be jerks sometimes. But you know what? There are always going to be people who make fun of you for something. Too smart, not smart enough. Too tall, too short, whatever. You can't live your life worried about what they think. Did kids make fun of you? He asked. All the time, I admitted. I was the poor kid with secondhand clothes and free lunch. I got plenty of shit for it. His eyes widened at the curse word, and I realized I'd just sworn in front of a 10-year-old. Probably not my best parenting moment. Sorry, bad word, but you know what I mean. He nodded slowly, but I didn't let it stop me from being who I was. I continued. And you shouldn't either. If you want to take the harder classes because you're interested and you want to learn more, then you should do it. Don't hold yourself back because you're worried about what other people think. What if I can't keep up? He asked quietly. What if I'm not actually that smart and I fail? Then you try your best and we figure it out together. But Ethan, you are that smart. I've seen it. The way you pick up new things, the questions you ask, the way you think through problems. You're brilliant. And you deserve a chance to see what you can really do. He looked down at his hands, thinking it over. Finally, he looked up at me. Okay, I'll try it. I ruffled his hair. That's my boy. The words came out automatically, without thought, but the moment they did, we both froze. I'd called him my boy. Not Marcus's son. Not my nephew. My boy. Ethan's eyes were wide, searching my face for something. I didn't take it back or try to explain it away. Instead, I just smiled. Yeah, my boy. If that's okay with you. He nodded, and I saw his eyes get shiny with tears he was trying to hold back. Yeah, that's okay. He leaned against me, and I put my arm around him, and we sat like that for a while, not talking, just being. Two people who'd found each other by accident and were slowly, tentatively, becoming a family. The transition to advanced classes was rocky at first. The older kids weren't exactly welcoming to the small 5th grader who suddenly appeared in their 7th grade math and English classes. I could see it wearing on Ethan, the way he'd come home quieter than usual, the way he'd started eating lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. Are the kids giving you a hard time? I asked one evening while we were doing his breathing treatment. He shrugged, which meant yes. What are they saying? Just stuff. That I'm a baby. That I think I'm better than everyone. That I'm a teacher's pet. He paused. There's this one kid, Tyler, who's the worst. He knocked my books out of my hands yesterday and called me a freak. Anger flared hot in my chest. Did you tell a teacher? No. That'll just make it worse. He was probably right, which made me even angrier. You want me to talk to the school? No. He looked alarmed. Please don't. I can handle it. Ethan, please, he said again, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. I don't want to be the kid whose uncle has to fight his battles. I'm already the weird kid who skipped grades and has to use an inhaler. I can't also be the tattletale. I understood where he was coming from, but it killed me to think of him dealing with bullies on top of everything else he had to handle. Okay, I said reluctantly. But if it gets worse, or if this Tyler kid touches you again, you tell me. Deal. Deal. The bullying continued for a few more weeks, but then something shifted. Ethan started coming home with stories about a kid named David who sat next to him in math and thought Ethan's solutions to problems were actually pretty cool. About a girl named Maya who asked him to help her study for a test. About how even Tyler had backed off after Ethan corrected the teacher on a math problem that everyone, including the teacher, had gotten wrong. They're starting to get that I'm not trying to show off, Ethan explained. I just like this stuff. And some of them think that's okay. That's great, buddy. I'm proud of you. And I was. Not just because he was doing well academically, but because he was figuring out how to navigate social situations that would have been difficult for anyone, let alone a kid his age. As Ethan settled into his advanced classes, I kept pushing on the work front. My freelance business was slowly growing, enough that I was able to cut back to part-time at the warehouse. The financial situation was still precarious. We were still one emergency away from disaster, but we were surviving. More than surviving, actually. We were building something. I'd started cooking real meals instead of just reheating takeout. Nothing fancy, but actual food made from actual ingredients. Ethan would sit at the counter doing homework while I chopped vegetables, and we'd talk about his day, about the things he was learning, about random questions he had about how the world worked. Why do people fall in love? He asked one night out of nowhere. I nearly cut my finger off. That's a big question. What made you think of that? We're reading Romeo and Juliet in English. It seems stupid. They barely know each other, and then they die. I laughed. Yeah, that's a fair critique of Romeo and Juliet. I don't know, kid. I think people fall in love because they find someone who makes them feel less alone. Someone who sees them for who they really are and likes what they see. Have you ever been in love? No, I admitted. Never really had time for it. Or maybe never met the right person. Mom and Dad said they were in love once. Ethan said quietly. But then they hated each other. How does that happen? I set down the knife and turned to face him. Sometimes people change. Or sometimes they realize they didn't really know each other as well as they thought. Love is complicated, Ethan. It's not like in movies where everything is perfect and people live happily ever after. Real love is hard work. It's choosing to stay even when things get difficult. It's showing up every day and putting someone else's needs alongside your own. He thought about that for a minute. Is that what you do? For me, the question caught me off guard. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I guess it is. Is that love? What we have? I looked at this kid who'd been dumped on my couch 6 months ago, this brilliant, kind, damaged boy who was asking me one of the most important questions anyone could ask, and I answered with complete honesty. Yeah, Ethan, that's love. He smiled, a full genuine smile that lit up his whole face, and went back to his homework. And I stood there at the counter, knife in hand, and realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped thinking of myself as a bachelor who got stuck with his brother's kid. I thought of myself as a dad, Ethan's dad, not because biology dictated it, but because I'd chosen it. Every single day, I chose it. Around the 8-month mark, I finally heard from Marcus. Sort of. I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just Ethan. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The message was short. James, I know you're probably angry. I know I shouldn't have left the way I did. But I wasn't in a good place, and I needed to get out before I did something worse. I'm doing better now. I'm seeing someone, a therapist I mean, and working through my shit. I know I can't undo what I did. I just want you to know that I think about Ethan. I wonder how he's doing. If he's happy. If he hates me. You don't have to respond to this. I just needed to say it. Marcus. I read the email 3 times. Anger, disgust, pity, they all swirled together in my chest until I couldn't separate one emotion from another. He thought about Ethan. Wondered if he was happy. But not enough to actually call, to video chat, to send a letter his son could read. Not enough to ask how I was doing, whether I was managing, whether I needed help. Just enough to ease his own conscience by sending an email to the void. I typed out a response. Deleted it. Typed another one. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, Ethan is doing great. He's in advanced classes at school. His asthma is well managed. He's healthy and safe and cared for. You don't get to know more than that. You made your choice. Live with it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then blocked his email address. I didn't tell Ethan about the message. What would be the point? Marcus had made it clear he wasn't coming back, wasn't going to be a father to his son. Telling Ethan would just hurt him for no reason. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I sat on the couch and let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for months. The anger at Marcus for being such a coward. The anger at Sarah for abandoning her son years ago. The fear that I was screwing this up, that I wasn't good enough, that Ethan deserved better than some guy who was just figuring it out as he went. But also the pride. Because Ethan was thriving. Despite everything he'd been through, every adult who'd failed him, he was smart and kind and stronger than he had any right to be. And maybe, just maybe, I'd had something to do with that. I'd shown up. I'd stayed. And I was going to keep staying for as long as he needed me. Forever, if that's what it took. The first year passed, then the second. Ethan grew, not just taller but more confident. The quiet, scared boy who'd arrived on my couch transformed into a young man who laughed easily, who had friends, who raised his hand in class and joined the robotics club. His asthma was under control, managed through daily medication and awareness of his triggers. We hadn't had an emergency room visit in over a year. We'd settled into a rhythm, a life that felt normal even though it had started in chaos. I'd quit the warehouse entirely and was making a decent living from freelance web development and design. It wasn't making me rich, but it paid the bills and gave me the flexibility to be there for Ethan. We moved to a bigger apartment, a 2-bedroom place in a slightly better neighborhood. Ethan got his own room for the first time in his life with us. He decorated it with posters of planets and astronauts and a periodic table he insisted was cool actually. On his 13th birthday, I threw him a party. Nothing elaborate, just a few of his friends from school, pizza, a cake I attempted to bake and partially burned. Ethan didn't care. He was happy, surrounded by people who actually liked him, laughing at terrible jokes and eating too much sugar. Watching him blow out the candles, I felt a swell of emotion so strong it nearly knocked me over. 3 years ago, this kid had been a scared, sick child whose own parents didn't want him. Now he was thriving, and I'd helped make that happen. Later that night, after his friends had gone home and we were cleaning up the disaster that had once been my living room, Ethan turned to me. "Thank you," he said. "For what? The party?" "It was nothing. Not just the party. For everything. For taking me in when Dad left. For not giving up on me. For," he paused, his voice getting thick, "for being my dad." I had to swallow hard before I could respond. "You don't have to thank me for that, Ethan. It's the best thing I've ever done." "Really? Really?" He hugged me, and I held him tight. This boy who'd become my son in every way that mattered, and I knew that no matter what else happened in my life, this was what I'd be most proud of. But of course, life doesn't let you stay comfortable for long. When Ethan was 14, I got another email. This time from Sarah, his biological mother. "James, I know this is out of the blue. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But I've been thinking about Ethan a lot lately. I made a mistake leaving him. I was young and scared and I handled it all wrong. I've been sober for 2 years now. I have a stable job, a nice apartment. I'm in therapy, working through my issues. I want to see him. I want to be part of his life again. I'm not trying to take him away from you. I know you've been the one raising him. But I'm his mother. Don't I deserve a chance to make things right?" I stared at the screen, anger rising in my throat. Now she wanted to be a mother. After 5 years of silence. After missing birthdays and holidays and every single important moment of Ethan's life. Now that he was older, easier, past the difficult years of managing his chronic illness and emotional trauma. Now she wanted back in. This time, I didn't agonize over whether to tell Ethan. He was 14, old enough to make his own decisions about this. That evening, I showed him the email. He read it in silence, his face unreadable. When he finished, he handed my phone back. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. "That's not up to me, buddy. She's your mom. If you want to see her, talk to her, try to have a relationship with her, I'll support that. But, I said carefully, I think you should protect yourself. She left once. She might leave again. And if you let her in, you need to be prepared for that possibility." He nodded slowly. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." He thought about it for 3 days. Then he came to me with his answer. "I want to email her back," he said. "I want to tell her that I appreciate that she's doing better, and I'm glad she's sober and in therapy. But I don't want a relationship with her right now. Maybe someday, but not now." "You sure?" "Yeah. You're my parent. You're the one who's been here. She made her choice 5 years ago, and I'm making mine now." I was proud of him for that. For knowing his worth, for setting boundaries, for not letting guilt or obligation dictate his choices. We sent the email together, with Ethan dictating while I typed. Sarah's response came a day later. She said she understood, that she was hurt, but she respected his decision, that she hoped maybe in the future they could reconnect. Then she didn't contact us again. I was relieved. But I also knew this wouldn't be the last time someone from Ethan's past tried to resurface. And I was right. Ethan's high school years flew by. He was taking college-level courses by sophomore year, racking up credits that would transfer when he eventually went to university. His robotics team won regional competitions. He got a part-time job tutoring younger kids in math and science, and he was good at it, patient and encouraging. He grew taller than me. His voice dropped. He started caring about how his hair looked and whether his clothes were cool enough. He was becoming an adult, and it was both thrilling and terrifying to watch. We'd made it legal by then. When Ethan was 15, I'd finally scraped together enough money to hire a lawyer and start the process of official guardianship. Marcus had to be notified and given a chance to contest it. He never responded. The judge granted me full legal guardianship without any fight, and I'd never felt such relief in my life. Ethan was mine, officially and permanently, and no one could take him away. When he was 16, Ethan started talking about college. Not in an abstract someday sense, but in a real, concrete way. I want to study computer science, he told me. Maybe engineering. I want to build things, solve problems, make things better. You'd be amazing at that, I said. Do you have schools in mind? A few. MIT would be incredible, but it's a long shot. Stanford, Berkeley, University of Washington has a good program, and it's close. I looked at this brilliant kid who'd taught himself coding at 10, who'd built his own computer from secondhand parts at 13, who'd started freelancing as a web developer at 15, and was making more per hour than I did. I don't think MIT is as much of a long shot as you think. He grinned. We'll see. We spent his junior year visiting colleges, taking road trips on weekends to tour campuses. Ethan would walk through the computer science buildings with his eyes lit up, asking questions about research opportunities and course offerings. I'd trail behind, equal parts proud and terrified of how much it was all going to cost. But I didn't let him see that fear. I just encouraged him to dream big, to apply anywhere he wanted, to not limit himself because of money. We'd figure it out. We always did. The acceptance letters started arriving in the spring of his senior year. University of Washington. UC Berkeley. Carnegie Mellon. Each one came with celebration, with pride, with me resisting the urge to call everyone I'd ever met and tell them my son was going to these incredible schools. And then, on a rainy afternoon in April, the Stanford letter came. Ethan held the thick envelope in shaking hands. I can't open it. What if it's a rejection? Then it's a rejection and you have 5 other amazing schools that want you. But you won't know unless you open it. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the letter. Then he looked up at me with an expression of pure joy. I got in. Full scholarship. Everything covered. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Everything. Everything. Tuition, room, board, books. All of it. He started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. Holy shit, I'm going to Stanford. I pulled him into a bone-crushing hug. I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud. We celebrated that night, just the two of us. I ordered from his favorite Thai restaurant. We watched his favorite movie, and we talked late into the night about his plans, his dreams, what his life might look like. None of this would have happened without you, he said at one point. You would have been brilliant no matter where you ended up, I said. Maybe, but I wouldn't have had the chance to find out. If you hadn't taken me in, if you'd given up on me or sent me to foster care or just done the bare minimum, I wouldn't be here. I know that. Well, I'm glad I was too stubborn to give up on you. He smiled. Me too. As graduation approached, I started thinking about what I wanted to do for Ethan. Something significant, something that would mark this transition from the scared kid who'd showed up with a half-zipped duffel bag to the confident young man about to head off to one of the best universities in the world. I didn't have much money, but I'd been saving. Little bits here and there. Whenever I got a bonus from a client or had a month where expenses were lower than expected, I'd saved for 2 years, never touching it, never even telling Ethan it existed. I used that money to buy him a car. Nothing fancy, just a reliable used Honda Civic with good mileage and a clean history. I knew he'd need a car at Stanford, knew he'd want the independence of being able to drive himself instead of relying on campus shuttles or friends. The day before graduation, I took him to see it. I'd parked it in front of our apartment building with a bow on the hood, the keys in a small box wrapped in recycled wrapping paper. What's this? Ethan asked, staring at the car. I handed him the box. Open it. He did, his eyes widening when he saw the keys. James, you didn't. I did. It's yours. For college. But this must have cost. Don't worry about what it cost. You need a car, and now you have one. He was staring at the keys like they might disappear. I can't accept this. Yes, you can. You've earned it. 4 years of straight A's, a full scholarship to Stanford, being an all-around amazing person. You've earned this and so much more. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For this, for everything, for. His voice broke, and he just threw his arms around me. You've given me everything. No, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to be better. We gave each other everything. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the bleachers with Mrs. Chun, who'd become like a grandmother to Ethan over the years, and we cheered louder than anyone when his name was called. Ethan walked across that stage with his head held high, and I felt like my heart might burst from pride. After the ceremony, as we were taking photos and celebrating, my phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer. Hello, James. It's Marcus. I went cold. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly 6 years. What do you want? I heard Ethan graduated. Heard he got into Stanford. Of course he had. Probably from one of our relatives, who we still saw occasionally. Yeah, he did. That's amazing. I always knew he was smart. I wanted to call and say congratulations. To both of you. You wanted to call, I repeated, my voice flat. After 6 years of nothing. Now you want to call and say congratulations? I know I don't have any right. You're damn right you don't have any right. You abandoned your son. You left him sick and scared with a stranger, and you never looked back. You don't get to call now and act like you care. I do care, Marcus said, and he sounded genuine. Maybe even sober. I've always cared. I just couldn't. I wasn't capable of being what he needed. Well, I was. And I did. And now he's brilliant and kind and successful, and it has nothing to do with you. There was a long pause. Then Marcus said quietly, I know it's all you. And I'm grateful. More than I can say. I don't want your gratitude. I want you to leave us alone. Can I see him? Just to say congratulations? I'm in town. I could. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. You don't get to walk back into his life now that all the hard parts are over. He doesn't need you. And frankly, I don't want you anywhere near him. James, please. He's still my son. No, I said, my voice hard. He's mine. You gave up that right 6 years ago. Don't call again. I hung up before he could respond and blocked the number. My hands were shaking. When I turned around, Ethan was standing there. He'd clearly heard at least part of the conversation. Was that my dad? He asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. What did he want? To congratulate you on graduating. On Stanford. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did you say? I told him no. I told him he doesn't get to show up now after missing everything. I paused. But if you want to see him, if you want to talk to him, I won't stop you. That's your choice. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. Then he shook his head. I don't want to see him. You're right. He doesn't get to come back now. He looked at me, and there was something fierce in his expression. You're my dad. Not him. You. Those words meant more to me than any diploma or acceptance letter ever could. Okay, I said, my voice rough. Okay. We went back to celebrating, surrounded by friends and loved ones, and I didn't think about Marcus again. He'd made his choice. We'd made ours. Summer passed quickly. Ethan worked his tutoring job and spent time with friends and helped me with some of my bigger freelance projects. We took a road trip down the coast, just the two of us, staying in cheap motels and eating at diners and talking about everything and nothing. It was perfect. And then, too soon, it was time for him to leave. We loaded up his new car with boxes of clothes and books and supplies. The apartment felt too empty even before he left. Mrs. Chun came up to say goodbye, pressing a tin of homemade cookies into Ethan's hands and telling him to call her sometimes. You take care of yourself, she said, hugging him tight. And take care of your father. He's going to miss you terribly. I will, Ethan promised. When it was just the two of us in the parking lot, neither of us seemed to know what to say. Well, I finally said, my voice not quite steady. I guess this is it. I'm going to call you every week, Ethan said. Every week, without fail. You better. And text me when you get there safe. I will. He hesitated, then said, Are you going to be okay? Without me here? The question surprised me. I should be asking you that. I'll be fine. I'm worried about you. You've spent the last 6 years taking care of me. What are you going to do now? I thought about that. The truth was, I had no idea. My whole life had revolved around Ethan for so long. I didn't know what my days would look like without him. I'll figure it out, I said. Maybe pick up a hobby. Learn to cook something besides pasta. I don't know. You should date, Ethan said. Find someone. You deserve to be happy too. I laughed. I am happy. You made me happy. You know what I mean. He stepped forward and hugged me. Thank you for everything. For giving me a home. For believing in me. For being the best dad I could have asked for. I held him tight, trying not to cry and failing. You made it easy, kid. You made it all worthwhile. When he finally pulled away and got in the car, when he waved one last time and drove off down the street, I stood there until I couldn't see his car anymore. Then I went back to the too quiet apartment and let myself cry. Not sad tears, exactly. Just the overwhelming emotion of this huge chapter closing. Ethan called 3 hours later to tell me he'd arrived safely, that his dorm was small but nice, that his roommate seemed cool. He called again the next day just to talk. And the day after that. True to his word, he called every week. Sometimes more. He'd tell me about his classes, his professors, the research project he was working on. He'd ask about my life, my work, whether I was eating properly. Sometimes we'd just talk about nothing, comfortable silences punctuated by random thoughts. 2 months into his first semester, I got a Venmo notification. $50 from Ethan with the note, for groceries. Buy the good cereal this time. I called him immediately. Ethan, you can't send me money. You're the college student. I got a part-time job doing tech support for the computer science department. I can afford it. And I know your refrigerator is probably empty except for condiments and leftover takeout. He wasn't wrong. Still, you should save that money. I am saving. But I can send you $50 a month. Let me do this. Please. I was too choked up to argue. Okay. Thank you. That became our new normal. Him is sending me small amounts of money that I didn't need, but accepted because I knew it made him feel good to contribute. Me sending him care packages with cookies and his favorite snacks. Regular calls where we talked about everything and nothing. And slowly, I started to rebuild a life that was mine, not just defined by being Ethan's guardian. I took Mrs. Chin's advice and started dating. Nothing serious at first, just coffee with people I met through work or at the gym I'd finally joined. It was strange, learning how to be just James again instead of Ethan's dad. But it was also freeing. I realized I liked this version of myself, the one who'd learned responsibility and compassion and what it meant to put someone else first. Those lessons made me a better person, a better partner, a better friend. I expanded my freelance business into a small agency, hiring a couple of other developers and taking on bigger clients. Money wasn't tight anymore. I moved to a nicer apartment and could actually afford to save for retirement. Life was good. Different, but good. Ethan's first winter break came, and he drove home with the car I'd bought him, pulling up in front of the apartment with a honk. I rushed down to meet him, and when he got out, I barely recognized him. He'd grown a little taller, filled out some. He looked older, more confident. But when he smiled, he was still my Ethan. Miss me, he asked. Every single day. We spent the break catching up, falling back into our old rhythms. He helped me with a complicated coding project. I cooked elaborate meals I'd learned how to make from YouTube tutorials. We watched bad movies and stayed up too late talking. It felt like he'd never left. But there was one new development. I met someone, he told me one night over dinner. Her name's Sarah. She's a sophomore studying biomedical engineering. We're in a study group together. I raised an eyebrow. Study group, huh? Is that what the kids are calling it these days? He blushed. It started as actually studying. But then we started getting coffee after, and talking about things that weren't school-related, and yeah, we've been on a few dates. And, do you like her? Yeah, a lot. She's brilliant and funny, and she doesn't think I'm weird for being so into computers. Anyone who thinks you're weird for that isn't worth your time. I'm happy for you, buddy. Thanks. I want you to meet her sometime. If that's okay. Of course it's okay. Bring her up next time you're home. Or I can drive down there. Actually, Ethan said, I was thinking maybe for my birthday. She's planning to stay on campus over spring break to work on a research project, so she'll be around. We could do dinner or something. That sounds perfect. When spring break came, Ethan brought Sarah to meet me. I'd been nervous, wanting to make a good impression, wanting to be sure she was good enough for my son. But the moment I met her, All my concerns evaporated. She was brilliant, yes, but also warm and kind. She looked at Ethan like he was the most interesting person in the room. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, laughed at my jokes, and clearly adored Ethan. Over dinner, I watched them together. The way they finished each other's sentences, the way she touched his hand when she was making a point, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon. "So Ethan tells me you're the one who raised him," Sarah said. "That you took him in when his dad left." "Yeah, best decision I ever made." "He talks about you constantly," she said. "About how you taught him to code, how you worked multiple jobs to pay for his medication, how you never gave up on him even when things were really hard. You're kind of his hero." I felt my throat get tight. "I'm nobody's hero. I just did what needed to be done." "That's exactly what a hero would say," she said, smiling. After dinner, when Sarah excused herself to use the restroom, Ethan leaned over. "So, what do you think?" "I think she's wonderful. I think you're lucky to have found her." "I think so too." He paused. "Thank you for being cool about this." "About me dating, I mean. I know some parents freak out. You're 19. You're in college. Dating is part of life. As long as you're happy and she treats you well, I'm happy." "She does. Treat me well, I mean. Better than I probably deserve." "You deserve the world, Ethan. Don't ever forget that." The rest of Ethan's college career passed in a blur of visits and phone calls and achievements. He made Dean's List every semester. His research got published in a prestigious journal. He landed a summer internship at a major tech company that paid more than I made in a year. Watching him succeed, watching him become this incredible adult, was the greatest joy of my life. But I'd be lying if I said it was all smooth sailing. When Ethan was 20, Sarah came with him for Thanksgiving. We were all in my kitchen, laughing and cooking and making a mess, when Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. "Excuse me," she said, stepping into the other room. Ethan and I continued mashing potatoes, but a few minutes later, we heard her voice rising. Not angry, but emotional. When she came back, she was crying. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her face. "That was my mom. My parents are getting divorced, and she just told me over the phone like it's nothing. Like it's no big deal." Ethan immediately went to her, pulling her into a hug. I made myself scarce, giving them privacy, but later that night, after Sarah had calmed down and gone to sleep in Ethan's old room, he came to find me. "Can I talk to you about something?" he asked. "Of course." We sat on the couch, and he was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Watching Sarah tonight, seeing how much her parents' divorce is affecting her, it made me think about my own parents. About Marcus and my mom. "Okay," I said carefully. "I used to be so angry at them. At Marcus for leaving, at Mom for leaving before him. I blamed them for everything bad that happened to me." He paused. "But tonight I realized something. If they hadn't left, I wouldn't have ended up with you. And you're the best thing that ever happened to me." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Ethan, I mean it. You taught me what it means to be a good person. You showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about showing up. You gave me everything I needed to become who I am. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you too," I managed. "You changed my life in the best possible way." We sat there together, and I thought about how far we'd come. From that rainy Tuesday night 6 years ago when I had no idea what I was doing, to this moment, sitting with my son who'd become an incredible man. It had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. It had also been the best. When Ethan graduated from Stanford, I was there in the front row, screaming louder than anyone when they called his name. He graduated with honors, with job offers from multiple top tech companies, with a future so bright it almost hurt to look at. After the ceremony, as we were taking photos and celebrating, I noticed someone standing off to the side. A man about my age, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. It was Marcus. I recognized him even though he looked different. Older, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with regret. Ethan saw him at the same moment I did. I felt him tense beside me. "Do you want me to tell him to leave?" I asked quietly. Ethan stared at his biological father for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No. Let him watch. Let him see what he missed out on." So we ignored Marcus and continued celebrating. Sarah was there, beaming with pride. Mrs. Chun had flown down for the ceremony, tears streaming down her face. Friends Ethan had made over the years, professors who'd mentored him, all of them gathering around to congratulate him. And Marcus just stood there on the sidelines, watching the life he'd given up, the son he'd abandoned who'd become extraordinary without him. Eventually, he approached. "Ethan," he said, his voice rough. "Congratulations. I'm so proud of you." Ethan looked at him with cool, assessing eyes. "Thank you. I know I don't have any right to be here. I know I gave up that right years ago, but I could not come. Not today." "That's fine," Ethan said. His voice was polite but distant, like he was talking to a stranger. Which, in a way, he was. "I'm glad you're doing well." Marcus's face crumpled slightly. "I'm sorry. For everything. For leaving you. For not being there. For missing all of this. I was a coward, and you deserved so much better." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "I did. But I got better. I got him." He gestured to me. "James is my father. In every way that matters. You're just the person who donated DNA." The words were harsh, but delivered without anger. Just fact. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He looked at me. "Thank you. For being what I couldn't be." I didn't respond. I just put my arm around Ethan's shoulders, a clear message. "This is my son, not yours." Marcus nodded, understanding. "I won't bother you again. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And that I'm proud, even if I have no right to be." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan watched him go without expression. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm good." He turned to me, and there was peace in his eyes. "He's nothing to me. Just a stranger. You're the one who matters." Sarah came over then, slipping her hand into Ethan's and pulling him toward another group of well-wishers. I stood there for a moment, watching my son, and felt a satisfaction deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. Marcus had thrown away the best thing that ever happened to him, and I'd been given the gift of a lifetime. The years that followed Ethan's graduation were good ones. He took a job at a prestigious tech company in the Bay Area, doing work I barely understood, but that he clearly loved. He and Sarah moved in together, a nice apartment in San Francisco with a view of the bay. They visited often, and I drove down to see them when I could. I watched them build a life together, watched them grow from college sweethearts to partners in every sense of the word. When Ethan was 24, he called me with news. "Sarah and I are getting married," he said, his voice full of joy. "I proposed last night, and she said yes." I felt my eyes well up. "Ethan, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both. We want to get married next summer. Nothing huge, just family and close friends. And James, I want you to walk me down the aisle. Or stand with me. Or however it works when it's two grooms and neither of us has traditional parents. I just want you there beside me. I wouldn't miss it for the world." The wedding was beautiful. They held it at a vineyard in Napa, the ceremony at sunset with the golden lights spilling over everything. Sarah was radiant in her dress, and Ethan was handsome in his suit, and I stood beside my son as he married the woman he loved, and I cried through the entire ceremony. During the reception, Ethan gave a speech. He thanked everyone for coming, thanked Sarah's parents for welcoming him into their family, thanked his friends for their support. And then he turned to me. "Most people start these speeches by thanking their parents," he said. "And I'm going to do that too, but not in the traditional way. Because the man who raised me, the man who taught me everything important I know about life and love and family, isn't here because of biology. He's here because he chose to be." He looked directly at me, and I could see tears in his eyes. "James, you took me in when nobody else wanted me. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me a good life. You never once made me feel like I was a burden, even though I know I was. You taught me that family is about showing up, about staying even when it's hard, about choosing to love someone every single day. You taught me that by doing it. Every single day, for 13 years, you chose me. You chose to be my dad. And that makes you more of a father than the man who shares my DNA could ever be." The room was silent except for the sound of people sniffling. "So thank you, Dad, for everything. For giving me a home, a future, and an example of what a real man, a real parent, looks like. I love you." I couldn't speak. I could barely see through my tears. I just stood and walked over to him and hugged him as tightly as I could. "I love you too, son," I whispered. "More than you'll ever know." The rest of the reception was a blur of celebration and joy. I danced with Mrs. Chun, who was now in her 80s but still spry enough to tear up the dance floor. I talked to Sarah's family, who'd become extended family to me as well. I watched Ethan and Sarah's first dance as husband and wife, and I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. This was my family, not through blood, but through choice and love and years of showing up. And it was perfect. 3 years after the wedding, Ethan and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Oliver. When Ethan called to tell me Sarah was in labor, I drove the 5 hours to San Francisco at record speed, probably breaking several laws in the process. I got to the hospital just after Oliver was born. Ethan was in the room with Sarah, both of them exhausted and emotional and radiating joy. And in Ethan's arms was this tiny, perfect baby. "You want to hold him?" Ethan asked. I washed my hands and took Oliver carefully, this tiny human who was somehow my grandson. He was so small, barely 6 pounds, with a tuft of dark hair and the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen. "Hey there, Oliver," I whispered. "I'm your grandpa." The baby scrunched up his face and made a small noise, and my heart melted completely. Over the next few months, I drove to San Francisco every chance I got. I couldn't get enough of Oliver, of watching him grow and change, of seeing Ethan become a father. And Ethan was a natural. Patient, attentive, loving in a way that made it clear he'd learned from the best, even though I'd just been making it up as I went along. When Oliver was 6 months old, I got a call from an unknown number. By now I knew better than to answer, but I did anyway. "Hello, James. It's Marcus." I closed my eyes. "How did you get this number?" "I have my ways." "Listen, I heard Ethan had a baby. A son. I was hoping maybe I could meet him, be a grandfather to him." A laugh burst out of me, bitter and sharp. "You have got to be kidding me. I know I wasn't there for Ethan, but maybe I could be there for his son. Maybe I could do better this time." "No," I said flatly. "Absolutely not. You had your chance to be a father. You failed. You had your chance to be in Ethan's life. You failed. You don't get another chance with his son. People change, James. I've changed. I don't care. You don't get to skip over the damage you caused and jump straight to being a loving grandfather. That's not how this works. Ethan's my son." "No," I interrupted. "He's mine. You gave up that claim 15 years ago when you left him sick and scared on my couch and flew off to Costa Rica. You don't get to claim him now." Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "I know I was a terrible father. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm begging you. Please, let me meet my grandson. Let me try to make up for some of the damage I caused." The answer is no. And if you call again, if you try to contact Ethan or Sarah or anyone in our family, I will get a restraining order. Do you understand? I didn't wait for an answer. I just hung up and blocked the number. When I told Ethan about the call later, he just shook his head. "Some people never learn," he said. "Oliver doesn't need him. He's got you." And that was true. I was grandpa to Oliver, the one who showed up for birthdays and holidays, who babysat when Ethan and Sarah needed a night out, who taught him his first words and helped him take his first steps. I was the one there for all of it, just like I'd been there for all of Ethan's important moments. That's what family does. They show up. Now, Oliver is 3 years old, a bright, energetic kid who's obsessed with trains and dinosaurs. Ethan and Sarah are talking about having another child. I'm 53, still running my web development agency, still living a good life. Last week, Ethan called me for advice on parenting. "Oliver's been having these meltdowns lately," he said. "Full-on tantrums where he just loses it. I don't know what to do. How did you handle it when I was difficult?" "You were never difficult," I said honestly. "You were the easiest kid to raise because you were so desperate to not be a burden, which was actually harder in its own way. So what do I do about the tantrums?" "You stay calm. You let him feel what he's feeling. You don't punish him for having emotions. You just love him through it and set boundaries when necessary." There was a pause. Then Ethan said, "How did you know how to do all this? How did you know how to be a good parent when you'd never done it before?" I thought about that night 15 years ago when Marcus dumped a sick, scared child on my couch and disappeared. I thought about all the mistakes I'd made, all the times I'd had no idea what I was doing, all the moments I'd been terrified I was screwing everything up. I didn't know, I admitted. I just loved you. And I showed up. That's all I knew how to do. Love you and show up. Everything else I figured out as I went. Well, you did an amazing job. I hope I can do half as well with Oliver. You're already doing great, Ethan. Better than great. You're an incredible father. I learned from the best. We talk every week still. Sometimes more. Ethan sends me photos of Oliver constantly, updates about his life, random thoughts and questions. We're still close, still a family, even though he's grown and has a family of his own now. That's the thing about the family we built. It wasn't dependent on proximity or obligation. It was built on choice and love, and those bonds don't break just because circumstances change. Looking back on everything, on that rainy Tuesday night that changed my life forever, I can honestly say I wouldn't change a thing. Yes, it was hard. Yes, there were moments I thought I couldn't do it, couldn't handle the responsibility, couldn't be what Ethan needed. But I kept showing up. I kept trying. I kept choosing him every single day. And he chose me back. Marcus called that choice abandonment. He saw taking responsibility for his son as a trap, a burden, something that would drag him down. But I found the opposite. Taking responsibility for Ethan didn't trap me. It freed me. It gave me purpose and meaning and a reason to be better than I'd ever been before. It taught me that love isn't something that just happens to you. It's something you do every day, in big ways and small ways, in showing up and staying and choosing someone again and again and again. That's what makes a family. Not biology, not obligation, but choice. And I chose Ethan. And he chose me. And together, we built something beautiful.